Last week in my podcast, I was discussing tunnel warfare, and it just completely missed my mind. A wonderful example of underground warfare would be the war rooms in Malta. Malta is an island in the middle of the Mediterranean, and during the Second World War, it was attacked constantly by the German Luftwaffe, and it got considerably bombed. And later on in the war, when the Allies had secured the North Africa, they started making their plans to advance into Italy, Sicily, and then up into Italy. And um, around that time, they set up the war rooms in Malta, and basically what they were deep. You have to think about it. Malta is an incredible island. From a military enthusiast point of view, it is well worth visiting on account of the fact that going way back, it used to be dominated by the Moors. Then it was taken over and it was used as a staging area for crusading into Jerusalem. It belonged to the British Empire. Again, it was a strategic point in the Mediterranean. It was a great way of covering the Middle East in terms of logistics and military movements. Um, then you had it was quiet during the First World War, but in the Second World War, it was heavily carpet bombed by the Luftwaffe. Um, they couldn't invade. They couldn't drop paratroopers onto the island. That island has a lot of military fortifications all right around it. Malta is roughly the size of Mayo, and on all different points of access to that island, you have all these little fortifications all around it. It's nearly as secure as the Rock of Gibraltar. That being said, it's also a good example of a war island, much along the lines of the islands that China is building in the East China Sea. Um, but there's a big difference because the ones that China are trying to make, they're artificial islands, whereas Malta, it's a rocky outcropping in the middle of the Mediterranean, and as a consequence of that, you can do some serious tunneling deep underneath that island, and it's perfectly dry. And an example of that would be the war rooms that I'm eventually going to come towards. Um, so where do I start? After the Second World War, the port of Malta was badly destroyed. So as part of reparations on the German side, the Germans rebuilt that port and the fortifications around the port and much of the city itself as well. And to see it today, it's a very considerable military structure. Although the port is used for civilian purposes, it's got high walls right around it, concrete walls with lookout posts, and at the entrance, when you go inside the port, there's this large concrete stone structure, which housed, which could be housed as a military fortification. I think it's mainly civil. Yeah, it's there's a lot of museums through it, but in case of an emergency, that part could be turned into a very significant military fortress. Um, so when you go in to the museums, there's a signage there that'll send you in direction of the war rooms, and what you do is you follow these narrow corridors in the streets, and you come around to the base of this high hill of rock, and there's a very inconspicuous gateway that's barely large enough to take a large truck could go down, but it's gated, and you go in through those gates and you go way down deep into the hill, and it's pure rock. and finally you'll come to an opening, and there you have access to what are called the war rooms, where the Allied commanders planned and organized and communicated um, their plans to the invading forces going into Sicily and on into Italy. Some very interesting rooms in there. There's a large map room with a large um, grid-lined map of the entire southern Mediterranean of Europe. And there's also a large table where you can plot movements of different either sea, air, or land forces. Can be moved around the map, or the map table as well, and that way commanders can actually they have a viewing balcony where they can actually look down on the table and they can see the whole lay of the land, the lay of the battle, the area of operations there. And in the background then as well is you have offices, cubicles with wireless radio transmitters and telegrams and all the communications stuff that was there, that was needed. Um, yeah, in terms of tunnel warfare, it's a wonderful example of just um, how you can operate in subterranean, in the relative safety from bombs and missiles and drones and things like that. And just another point on those tunnels in Gaza as well. Hamas poured an awful lot of money into the upkeep of those tunnels. In fact, it's known as the Metro. It's a series of subway caverns, and there's rooms there for accommodating lots of different fighters, storage of material, and there's also even mechanisms that allow them to um, they can take a missile up to the surface, launch the missile, then escape back into the chute, close it all up like they weren't even there. There's a lot of that going on. So that's all I have to say about tunnel warfare. The military war rooms is well worth a visit if ever you go to Malta. That's all I'd say there. And after exploring the whole idea of tunnel warfare and tunnel structures, it brings me onto the whole field of military structures, the importance of building military structures, and what are they for, and why is it important that we should have them or even consider investing in them. When you consider the Ukraine war, the Ukraine government have been applying to get F-16 fighters, and it's been a very slow process, and they reckon it'll be another couple of months before we see F-16s flying in Ukrainian skies. And one of those reasons is on account of the fact of the lack of infrastructure available for those machines to be able to take off and do their sorties, come back, and be put into hangars so that they could be overhauled, maintained, and protected from enemy attacks. It's an interesting point because in Russia, Ukraine is embarrassing Russia by attacking Russian airfields, and there's super expensive fighter aircraft, bombers, and large transport planes being attacked simply because they're parked right beside the runway. There's absolutely no protection whatsoever for them. There's an example there of a drone flying in from outside the base, flying straight over, landing on top of the wing of a very large plane, dropping a grenade and just flying away. The Russians have been playing catch up ever since, and it's crazy to see the different techniques and tactics they've tried to do uh, in order to deceive the Ukrainian attacking drones. Um, on top of that, the X-35, one of the most modern fighter aircraft in the world, they've been produced in quite large numbers, but recently there was a report done to say that there's not enough facilities to actually house those machines. And when they talk about hangars, they're not just talking about basic block and a basic shed. It's not that at all. Um, those hangars, they have to be concrete hardened. They have to be steel doors hung across them. Also, they have to be large enough to allow maintenance crews to be able to come in comfortably with all sorts of forklifts and maintenance vehicles to be able to go in and service the aircraft indoors. Also, when I think about it, the Russian Air Force are having a terrible job of maintaining their helicopter fleet as well, on account of the fact that it's freezing cold. Their machines are parked outside. You only have to leave the door half open in a helicopter, and the entire avionics and cockpit is frozen stiff. And it takes hours of painstaking drying to prevent sensitive equipment from getting destroyed in that moisture laden weather. Furthermore, with all the storms that we're having here in Ireland in the last week or so, I think about all the military structures that are out there that that are like makeshift tents. They look like a great alternative to having a proper hardened facility, but by God, if a panel was to tear on the side of a tent and for cold, wet wind to get into sensitive machinery like helicopters, particularly, it would be very expensive for the government to replace all that sensitive equipment. So it is vitally important that we do consider that whenever, if going forward with whatever machinery that the defence forces are looking to purchase, they really have to consider and to invest heavily in the side of shelter for those machines. I'm also hearing chatter as well about a new naval ship that's coming our way. It's particularly large, leaving things like them parked outside in the open. It's exposed to the elements, and I suppose a big ship, they're designed to withstand the Atlantic, but at the same time, all metal rusts. you know it's important to have a proper sheltering facilities, maintenance facilities available for all these equipments going forward. That's all I say. Take care.